Hello and welcome to SimCast, the higher education simulation podcast. My name's Tony Jeremy. I'm the academic lead for simulation-based education at UEA Norwich.
Hello everyone, welcome back to SimCast. My name's Lawrence Hill and I chair the simulation group in the School of Health Sciences at UEA Norwich.
Lawrence, so I think for our listeners, I think we need to put a bit of context around this episode.
Yeah.
It is late in the afternoon on a Friday.
Yep.
We both have been stacked with work.
Yep.
And we're just a bit cheesed off.
Getting a bit cheesed off now. And actually, do you know what? We've had some fantastic guests on recently. We've been on our absolute best behaviour.
We have been gold star pupils, haven't we?
But there have been a few things bubbling away that have really started to get my goat a little bit.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah.
So
and
this
is kind of like a rage room SimCast.
And we're quite prepared that we may well get cancelled for this episode. So
and when we finish cutting it, it probably won't get to air anyway. But nevertheless, we're going to try and keep it clean because in this episode, we are going to be talking about our biggest gripes.
In simulation.
Yeah, exactly that.
If you enjoyed the episode, give us a like. Equally so, if you didn't like the episode, give us a dislike. But let us know in the comments why, because we're always keen to improve. To stay up to date with all things Sim, subscribe to the channel and don't forget to check that notification bell. And SimCast is available on all popular streaming platforms. Right, we've just finished the top 5 series and we thought we could do top 5 and actually...
Yeah, let's do top 5. And then it got a bit longer than that.
We got a bit longer.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to base it around briefing, action phase and debrief, and we're going to dip into the things that really cheese us off.
Yeah, why not?
As we go through. So things related to briefing or the planning of sim.
Yes. I think probably if we can just kick off with badly written learning outcomes. Oh, for God's sake. So yeah, when you're a simulation educator and you come into a sim session and, you know, like us, if you work in a higher education context, you know, you're working amongst academics, we deal with learning outcomes every day, day in, day out, they're our bread and butter.
We're supposed to.
We are.
But when you go to a sim, maybe you're facilitating facilitating somebody else.
That's easy for you to say.
Easy for me to say. And you look at the screen and either there isn't one, which is even worse, or you just look at some learning outcomes and they haven't been thought about.
No. Or they've been thought about as an afterthought. They've been kind of, better write some learning outcomes rather than them being front and centre.
Or guiding what you're designed to do.
Yeah. And because as an educator, I want to say, the aim of today's kind of simulation portfolio or this particular simulation is guided by this learning outcome. And if I can't get behind it, I find myself changing it.
Yeah. And we bang on about learning outcomes, and actually those of you viewing, one thing you might get annoyed about is how much we bang on about learning outcomes. But they should shape all of your simulation activity, and they're things to go back to refocus the debrief.
Yeah.
So they're essential.
Yeah.
And badly written ones really...
They're top of the shop, aren't they? On the gripes.
They erode everything in terms of the educational underpinnings of the simulation activity.
Yeah, so that's gripe number 1. And that kind of feeds into gripe number 2, which is a lack of clarity in the briefing or a lack of effective briefing altogether. There's some great papers, Somerville's paper about 12 tips for the pre-brief. Can I add pre-brief to my list of gripes?
I know it's a gripe of yours.
It is a gripe of mine.
What's a brief and a pre-brief?
What's the difference between a brief and a pre-brief? Anyway, this isn't an episode about that, but maybe I'm just being a bit ranty.
At some point this afternoon.
Yeah, fair. So a lack of clarity in the briefing, though. When you've got educators turning up, you're about to do the session, and more often than not, actually, this goes okay, and you get a bit of clarity. But when there isn't a lack of clarity in that briefing, that for me, I feel unsettled. I feel nervous, and I think that translates over to the nervous.
Not just lack of clarity when it's rushed as well. Mm-hmm. And again, we've talked about this before, that a good briefing helps to sort of settle the nerves of the facilitators, but also the learners as well. So if any of that's rushed, if you haven't had an opportunity to ask questions or go through kit and equipment, then I think you're just starting off on the wrong foot.
Yep, totally.
Talking of kit and equipment, another gripe of mine.
Go on, tell us, Tony. What is this other gripe of yours?
Is when the kit is either unavailable or you can't use it.
Oh, kit that you can't use.
So for a couple of reasons, it might be broken.
Yeah.
And that might not have been communicated to you, and then you turn up with your plan or intention of using it, and then you can't for whatever reason. Or there are some instances where kit's expensive, and therefore it kind of gets ring fenced, and you can't. We've had an example
Protected.
of a cardiac arrest trolley where there's stuff on it because it's consumable and it can't, it needs to be replaced. People have said, well, can you just use it for demo purposes? And it just erodes the point of the simulation. Mm-hmm. Part of that is interacting and living that experience to go through it.
Yeah. We've got a particular mannequin here, a very expensive birthing mannequin, which can't be used on the floor. And, being a paramedic educator, paramedics do it on the floor most of the time. Yeah. And, not being able to...
And it is little things like that, isn't it? Can you have it plugged in? Because otherwise the batteries will discharge. Yeah. But actually, when you have it plugged in, can you be careful about moving it?
Yeah.
And so there's these practical elements which sort of erode the realism of the simulation, or they're
just a bit frustrating. They're just a bit of a gripe.
Stops you from doing what you want to do.
I feel better already. One of the other things, talking of kit and equipment, and conscious that a lot of this kit is designed and manufactured over in the States, but that translates over into all of the voices.
Doc, I don't feel very well.
And the
apologies to all of our American cousins out there watching this, but American only voices.
Yeah.
I just want a bit of the Queen's English, on American.
Oh, one has chest pain. No, but in truth, it does. Again, it erodes that fidelity to the fiction contract.
And companies go to great lengths to look at diversity in simulation mannequins.
Absolutely.
But that includes the voices as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And what happens then is you end up I end up then doing, which might lead into one of your other gripes a bit later about overacting, but I tend to I'll do the voice, but I always sort of go to the East End, geezer. Yeah, that terrible pain in my chest, mate. Absolute agony, mate.
I've seen that patient before. Yeah. I've seen you do that one before.
Yeah, 100%. Well, but so that is, it's a simulation artifact, isn't it? That just for that moment, click. Oh, we can't use the voice because it's gonna, like you say, I don't feel good, and it doesn't, and you lose that fidelity to the fiction contract in that moment.
Okay, so you've mentioned it, so we might as well talk about it.
Yeah,
overacting.
Yeah.
So moving into the action phase now, delivering simulation. You're the role of the patient. This is my time to shine.
Yeah, exactly. This is the people who experience social facilitation that take it to a whole new domain. But
I guess on the flip side, not putting enough effort in is equally as bad.
Yes, yeah. There's a sort of a sweet spot in the middle, isn't there? And when we were talking to Kate and Kev in the episode about the GIC, that overacting has been shown previously to be unhelpful for learners, particularly if they're feeling in some way vulnerable, because learning is a process of going through vulnerable experiences.
So how do we get out over that? Do we just use actors? That you always run the risk when you're trying to do it, I guess, being mindful of your resources, or you don't have enough money for actors and stuff. If you go for your learners or you go for faculty members, you're always running the risk of actually this person isn't a professional when it comes to this. So how are they going to...
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've set out in this episode to find solutions. I thought we were just having a rant.
Fair point. It worries me though.
Yeah, and there is a psychological cost, isn't there, to asking people who are not professional actors to play a role. But overacting and over-egging it and making it a bit too much, but then getting it just right just lifts the learning experience massively. I
guess some of it comes with experience, doesn't it? But,
yeah. And like you say, the other end of that, because overacting really comes probably from a level of kind of hyper engagement with the task.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Right. And so the flip side of that is that it's not real.
Yeah, people who just don't want to engage.
Yeah, but people who come with the almost for whatever reason come with the intention of not engaging in a meaningful way.
Yeah, it's slightly different from those people who might feel uncomfortable being in simulation because I think there's still a willingness to learn. But when you get the learner, and it happens at all stages, so we primarily teach undergraduate learners, but I've seen consultants and other experienced people.
Yeah, I don't have time for this kind of thing. The thing is if that's you, like, that's fine. If you don't want to engage,
But
don't come.
don't turn up.
Yeah.
Don't come. I'd rather you weren't there.
Because the issue for me is that it degrades the learning experience for the rest of the learners. Only because that kind of cynical mentality towards a simulation is infectious.
And it's fascinating, isn't it? As a facilitator, you just scan the room and you can see people rolling their eyes at those
Straight
individuals because it just, they want to put the time and effort into it, and the bad egg.
Yeah, so it's not real or whatever. Those gripes, and we have to take some responsibility for the authenticity of the simulation.
Yes, it may well, If it's down to us because of that, because it's been an absolute flop, then fine.
Yeah,
but actually, if it's a well manicured and curated activity, and you just got someone who's like, well, don't do it like this in practice.
Yeah. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
It's simulation. Sorry. It's not real.
Yeah. So that's definitely a gripe. One of the others is an obsession, I think, with technology.
Yeah.
So quite often now people are talking about simulation and technology enhanced learning. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's an uncomfortable grouping right there.
Yeah.
And it's like simulation has been brought closer to technology as opposed to being recognized as a
technique,
complex social endeavor, which is a technique of facilitating learning.
Yeah. And what happens is it then has a knock-on effect to the uneducated in simulation.
Yeah.
You get people, and I've had this so many times who are scared about doing simulation because they think they have to be tech savvy.
Yeah.
And then when you talk to them, or they can see that you can do really good sim without any technology.
Yep.
They're like, oh,
yeah,
little light bulbs come on.
I mean, an example of how perhaps where this may have come from was we as you may know, we run a simulation instructor course, which has an online learning component, which is comprised of 6 of our podcasts, and then a face-to-face day where we talk about educational theory and developing psychological safety and skills tuition and introducing how to brief and facilitate and debrief simulation effectively. And we intentionally focus on the technique of simulation. And one of the pieces of feedback that
not that it hurt
at all, not that I'm still bitter about it or anything, but one of the pieces of feedback was,
I thought this was about training me how to use SimMan. Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, where does this fascination or obsession with technology come from? Technology is really useful, but it's just a tool in the educator's toolbox.
I don't blame the individual for saying it because they clearly got the wrong end of the stick.
Yeah.
But
it was still a
you
bit
just
of a
want to
gripe.
open that Pandora's box to the wider side of simulation and say, look what you can achieve.
Yeah.
Without. But sometimes I think it is driven by policymakers and decision makers who say you have to do this, particularly because we've spent this money on it.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
On a similar vein of misunderstanding, one thing that I get gripes about is how the word simulation is just used to encompass everything.
Okay.
Whether that's skills teaching, which clearly is different to simulation, or whether it's the OSCE or exam. Because again, assessment and simulation are different.
Yeah.
They're nuanced. Perhaps this is just because it's understanding the language of simulation. But when someone goes, oh, I'm doing some sim and it's an OSCE assessment, or when they are just doing some very fundamental skills training, I'm thinking it's not quite simulation.
Sure.
And then
I don't know.
I think
but I think there'll be people that disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think there'll be people that will say that simulation is a modality, and underneath that umbrella modality is a whole load of other things as well.
So I guess for me, what is the gripe is the confusion around it. And then when regulatory bodies then tag onto that and then say, okay, well, now we're going to measure a simulation in terms of hours,
Yeah. We don't measure learning in hours in really any other way, generally speaking.
So for me, it's simulation being used as a panacea. That's what is my gripe.
That is a very reasonable gripe. And I think you're right. And we've talked on the podcast previously about the language of sim, and I wonder whether some of these gripes will resolve in time as the language of simulation evolves to reflect the complexity of what's happening.
Or what goes the other way, and the language just dissolves further and further, as we see in the wider world, and we see slang and other variations of it.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So we better bring this simulation to a close and move on to the debrief and all of our gripes in there, right?
But before we move to the debrief, so panacea being a medication, another kind of sort of application,
right,
is lube.
Oh, yeah.
So another gripe of mine is you're about to sit down for a debrief and you've got airway lube all over your hands.
It's just a horrible feeling. And
clammy, sticky, horrible feeling.
It's nasty. And also add into that stuff is the, if you're doing anything involving that fake blood that you get in the IV stuff, that stuff just stains forever, doesn't it? Yeah. You look
the
like
floor, your clothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've always got some poor student who's worn their best threads, and which is an argument for having a uniform policy.
Yeah.
Not that that's another gripe of mine.
No gripe there at all. So the other thing as well is running your sim. So briefing, doing your action phase, running your debrief, and then releasing your learners at the end of the debrief, and then sitting there and waiting, because someone else's simulation session is hopelessly overrunning.
People running late when you've got parallel streams.
Oh, that's a big bugbear.
If you've watched last week's episode and you're a resuscitation instructor or life support instructor, you will know this feeling.
Yeah.
When and to be fair, these days are complex to run, multiple streams running simultaneously, but there's always someone who is running late. And as you know, Kevin and Kate talked about yesterday, keeping to time is actually an important part of being a good instructor.
Yeah, definitely. So talking of the debrief, I think we could have, there's probably quite a few gripes we could have raised about the debrief. We don't want to go too far. But I think in terms of debriefing itself and the kinds of, the way that it's handled, I think one thing that if I'm co-debriefing and...
Are we just going to contradict ourselves now? And say that running late is an issue, but not having enough time for the debrief is an issue.
Yes, but I'm comfortable with that dissonance. Yeah, no, but there's separate things, like not having debrief factored in adequately, not allowing time for the debrief.
Yeah,
it's a different thing from...
You turn up for a day of sim and you see the plan for the day and you're like,
oh okay.
There's no time for
45 minute sims and 5-minute debrief. I mean, which doesn't happen very often, but it's the sort of thing when it's been constrained. So yeah, not enough time for the debrief is a problem. But during that debrief itself, I think some of the things that are problematic and they're a bit of a gripe is when educators ask really closed or leading questions in the debrief.
Yeah.
That's I always think it's a shame. It's a gripe for me because it's a missed opportunity.
I think it's down to a lack of practice and perhaps experience.
Yeah.
And I don't think it ever comes from a bad place, but it can kind of erode what you're trying to achieve from a debrief.
Yeah, exactly. And coupled in with that are the kind of guess what I'm thinking questions. There was something that happened
that you didn't do
about 5 minutes in that would have been really good. This patient was hypoxic. What do you think would have been a good intervention at that stage?
I don't know.
I'm
going to bumble around trying to answer everything.
Like you say, it comes perhaps from a lack of experience or perhaps a lack of confidence in just advocating for the learner and saying, I noticed this. I'm not sure that it was the best thing in the world. What was going through your mind?
If you use a technique like advocacy with inquiry, there is a learning curve to it, doesn't it? It takes a little while for you to get comfortable to start to reframe those questions.
Yeah.
But it's definitely the way to go with those kind of things.
Yeah.
Too much talking.
Which is a tricky one for a podcast to discuss on a podcast. But yeah, we think too much talking is bad.
Again, the acronym wait, why am I talking as an instructor is a great one to think about. Facilitate the discussion rather than talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know about you, but I feel quite a lot better after that.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit better now.
I feel a little bit lighter from having just aired some of those gripes.
So anyone who's still listening, because we do appreciate that we've been on a bit of a rant.
Yeah, we have ranted.
If there's anything that really gets your goat that we've missed, stick it in the comments below.
Please do.
Right. I feel like
Rant over.
I'm all ready for the weekend now.
Guys, thank you very much for listening in to SimCast. We hope you enjoyed the episode and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye for now.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.